And welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today we are talking about the key takeaways from yesterday's win against the Philadelphia Eagles. And so let's start with point number one. This is a headline here on Yahoo Sports, but Jaden Daniels and the Commanders overcome 5 turnovers to rally past the Eagles. And so I think that that is just point number one from yesterday. And I think just really the theme from this season is just that this team is very resilient. I think that this is not the first time that we saw this. We obviously saw that against the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that we saw that against the Chicago Bears. And really, we saw that against the Dallas Cowboys, even though that this team fell short. And so I love this about the Washington Commanders. I think that this is something that the Commanders can certainly build on because in playoff games, you're going to be down. You're going to be faced with adverse situations. And so it is good to see that this team has been able to stick together and really respond. I can tell you as a fan, I've seen several teams in the past that would get down, and I just knew that, it was probably over for the most part, but not this team with the way that it is really built and just the mentality that they have. They just never feel like they are out of games. And so you have to love that quality about this team. And I think it is something that is going to translate to some real success, counting that the Commanders can go ahead and just lock up this playoff seed here in this next week. And so next up, another key takeaway is going to be just the third down efficiency in this game. And so the Washington Commanders were 7 of 13. Meanwhile, the Eagles were 3 of 16. And so that was probably the story, I think, just as this game went on, is that the Philadelphia Eagles had the top defense coming in, and they just could not get off the field. And so the Washington Commanders really continued to make plays, got to the first downs when they needed to. And that is something that we've been talking about really throughout the season, is just this team's ability to really move the chains and dominate in the time of possession. And so that is really, I think, the bread and butter along with that running game for the Washington Commanders. So that is key number two. The third down efficiency is something that absolutely translates, because when you are going down the field, you are sustaining drives and things like that. You're wearing down a defense, and you're also keeping the opposing quarterback on the sideline, which is something that you're going to need to do. You have to play a bit of ball control offense and have the confidence to score points. Clearly, we see that this team can absolutely score points here, and that shouldn't be an issue. So the fact that they know how to control the clock, I think that that is also going to help this Washington Commanders team, certainly once they can get into the postseason. And so next up, I think another key takeaway here is that the Washington Commanders did a terrific job as far as keeping the pocket clean for Jaden Daniels. Only giving up 1 sack. This is something that we talked about here in this last video or two. Just the fact that the Commanders gave up way too many sacks against the Saints, and it's something that you just cannot continue to do that as you start to play some winning football. And so to see that this offensive line has really come together, I think that it's getting better each week. And to see that they've only given up 1 sack to an elite defense, I think that that was definitely a key takeaway from this one. And that allowed Jaden Daniels towards the end to make some plays down the field. So that was a great job up front for our offensive line. And so next up, I think another thing that really is a key takeaway here, and it's something that I think that the Washington Commanders really have got to clean up, it is the penalties, okay? Because it was inexcusable again here. The Commanders, look, we've been really, we were the 6th most penalized teams as far as yards given up over the past 3 games. And so that's something that we have got to stop here. And so 6 penalties for 93 yards is not going to get it done. Obviously, a lot of those things came from, defensive fouls and things like that. But anyway, you just cannot, you cannot operate like this, especially as this team gets ready to go into the playoffs. And so I know that we had 3 pass interference penalties, which is not very good. I know it's an elite unit that we were going against, but this is still something that the Washington Commanders need to clean up. And so next up, I think another key takeaway here is defense. The defense as a whole, I think, just did a terrific job as this game went along, because this is according to an article that I'm looking at here that was talking about the fact that Eric or it's not Eric, but Saquon Barkley, he goes out there and in the first half, he clearly ripped up the Washington Commanders. I mean, he had, 109 yards, he had 2 touchdowns, and he had that big 68 yarder at the end of the first quarter. But statistically, here, after that, he only had 37 rushing yards on 19 carries, and he finished with a 1.95 yards per carry at the end of that game. And so the Washington Commanders' run defense really stepped it up. And whatever they did in that second half, they've got to make sure that they keep that game tape and then just kind of work on that, because I think that they did a terrific job as far as staying disciplined. I think that they did a great job as far as filling the run lanes and not giving up any type of angles. And I know probably the offense for the Eagles did probably have to adjust a little bit with Kenny Pickett out there, but still, Saquon Barkley still was ripping off some good stuff out there. And so that was good to see, and I think it's a key takeaway here from yesterday's win, that the Washington Commanders defense was able to really fix something that has been a struggle for this team. And so that was great to see here. And so lastly, time of possession. I think that we just kind of exercise something here, because generally when we lose the time of possession battle, we lose the football game. And in this game, we lost it. We were only on the field there for 23 minutes and 42 seconds versus the Eagles, who had it for 36 minutes and 18 seconds. But the Washington Commanders were able to pull it out. And so that can be also a good sign too, as well. You don't want to have to lean on that, but it is good to know that if we do not dominate in the time of possession, then we can still win that football game. And I think that mainly that stat probably ties into the running game, because when you look at what happened to Brian Robinson Jr., he really struggled out there. And I think that when this team is really clicking and they're controlling the clock and everything like that, it starts with the run game. And we just really didn't get that going. In fact, it was Jaden Daniels that made all the plays as far as the running game was concerned. He had 9 carries for 81 yards. A lot of that, came off scrambles and things like that. But yeah, Brian Robinson Jr. only 10 carries for 24 yards, and he had 2 fumbles out there. So really a tough day for the Washington Commanders ground game, something that we have to fix. And so lastly, I think a bonus that I wanted to mention here is just the wide receiving core, just as a whole. I think that they did something special out there, especially with Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus did a great job with the 5 receptions, 70 yards, and the 2 touchdowns. De'Ami Brown, 4 receptions, 56 yards. Terry McLaurin, we know what he brings to the table, 5 receptions, 60 yards, and a touchdown. But I'm just really impressed with the fact that we saw so many players step up. Jamison Crowder, 2 touchdowns, only had 15 yards, but still, they were a huge 15 yards for the Commanders. And so I know a lot was talked about with the Commanders not going out there and getting a wide receiver either via the free agent market or trading for one. But the Washington Commanders are figuring it out. Even though they don't have Austin Eckler, Zach Ertz did play. He only had a catch for 12 yards, but still, it all contributed to the bigger picture here. And so this team is really connected. It looks pretty good. And I think that they just got to go ahead and control their own destiny here and win the football game this next week. And that is certainly going to help this team get into the playoffs. And we still have a chance at the division as well, depending on what happens to the Eagles. If we can continue to win out, it is going to be very interesting down the stretch. And so let me know in the comments what you are thinking about these key takeaways from the Washington Commanders win against the Eagles. I'll say it again. I think that this was a huge win for the Commanders. This is something that they absolutely can build off of. Beating a team like this that had been into the Super Bowl. I know that there's going to be a lot of people that say, yes, well, Jalen Hurts was hurt. I mean, that is part of football. And this team still was, they were beating the Washington Commanders. And so still, this team had to turn it on as a team to dig this one out. We saw some history in this game as well because Terry McLaurin, he reached 1,000 yards. He also tied Ricky Sanders as far as touchdown receptions in a season, and I can only see that going up here with these last couple weeks to go. And so good stuff. The Washington Commanders continue to break records, and as usual, I'd love to know your thoughts, and I'll see you on the next one. All right, go Commanders. All right, peace.